Okay. Good afternoon. It's 1 p.m. on Tuesday, May the 2nd, and I want to call to order the Public Services and Facilities Committee meeting. We have all council members present. Councilmember Popson is calling in, so he's on the phone. Councilmember Myers is here, as well as myself. And I'd like to acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of this meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The first thing we have on the agenda is citizens' comments. Nicole, did you have any citizens that had enrolled to speak?
No, sir.
Okay. We do have a speaker here today that I would like for council members to entertain to have a few comments to say to council, and that is Rich Boswick. He's a citizen of South Carolina, of Isle of Palms, and he will identify himself and his address when he gets up here, but he did ask me to be allowed to have some comments. So I would like to recognize him if it's okay with the fellow council members.
Fine with me.
Sounds good.
Fine with me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're all in agreement with that, so we'll recognize Mr. Boswick.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. I'm speaking on behalf of
Speak directly into that microphone pretty loudly. Okay.
I'm speaking on behalf of 9 out of the 11 property owners that we're talking about today, the 11 properties. Just so everyone understands the issue, there are 11 properties between 43rd, well, I should say on 43rd, 44th, and 45th Avenues that are obligated to follow the restrictions of Wild Dunes, however, never were part of the Wild Dunes Association. This is just, these 11 properties are more or less a sub-portion of the properties in that area. On those specific blocks, we're talking about 21 properties in total, 11 of which, going back to what I said earlier, are obliged to follow the restrictions of Wild Dunes. And I could get into all the reasons why that happened, but it's actually a very head-scratching issue for a lot of the residents in the area, that these 11 property owners, because based upon the information that we've received from them, many of them had no idea that they were subject to these restrictions prior to purchasing their house. That's a whole nother issue for now. Anyway, to make a long story short, what happened is we solicited input from the 11 property owners to see if they were interested in pursuing with Wild Dunes the ability to relieve ourselves of those restrictions. Okay. We recently reached out to Wild Dunes in a letter, and we received a response from Wild Dunes yesterday. Their response basically said, in short, that they were not opposed to our request. However, there is a number of legal issues, relatively simple legal issues, that need to be overcome first. Those issues would include the modification to the covenants, as well as seeking input from not only the 11 properties, but properties that abut those 11 homes. Not a very difficult issue by any means. Now, our concern, and the reason why we're before you, is assuming that Wild Dunes gives the okay to relinquish us of those responsibilities, that leaves us in somewhat of a vacuum as to the restrictions on our property. I think that's happened in the past before in Wild Dunes, rather on Isle of Palms, where Wild Dunes' restrictions sort of went away and there were no restrictions in place for those properties. What we want to do as property owners is we want to make sure that there is no gap in restrictions on our property. So therefore, assuming that Wild Dunes gives the okay, as they had mentioned they were inclined to do in the letter that I received yesterday, we want to make sure that the city is willing to accept us as part of SR1. So again, there is no gap in having restrictions on our properties. That's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Thank you, Mr. Boswick. We appreciate your comments. We will have this as a discussion item later in the agenda, but thank you so much for coming in. Is anybody else in the audience that would like to speak?
Actually, I do.
I'm sorry.
But, well, hold on. Technically, and during citizens' comments, you're not supposed to engage with them like that.
Oh, okay. I thought he was kind of more of a speaker, but we'll wait until later.
Okay.
just to be consistent with all of them, and you guys can.
Now, we can also reserve the right to ask a question directly
Absolutely.
during that discussion
Yes.
period, too.
You
So
guys can just-
you may
you
want
vote
to
on
do
it, we
that.
disagree on that, but you
Right.
just have to.
Right,
fine.
okay. All right, thank you very much. All right, next order of business is approval of the previous meeting minutes from April the 4th. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I'll second it. All in, any discussion or modifications? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So that's approved unanimously. All right, then we move on to old business, and what I'd like to do at this point is move to suspend the rules of order and discuss item B first under the new business items. And so we would move this, item B, discussion of request from the property owners on 43rd, 44th, and 45th Avenue for properties to be rezoned from the PDD, which is the Planned Development District, into SR1. So,
I'll second that. I'll second that motion.
okay, any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Good.
Aye. No opposed, so we will do that. So we're into item B, and if we could, Douglas, I'd like to call on you to give us a little more background on this from the city perspective. I know you've been working this issue, and if you could,
Sure.
give us some background and input
Yeah,
here.
sure. These 11 properties have, from my perspective, been kind of an anomaly for as long as I've been here. And as Mr. Bozak has said, they have always been outside of Wild Dunes, outside of the gates, but within the PDD for purposes of being counted as in the PDD, for purposes of architectural review. Those projects, we've always held permit requests until Wild Dunes ARC has reviewed them. It is very similar to the condition we had between 53rd and 57th. Those properties were also outside of the gates, but they were beholden to their standards. In the area of 53rd to 57th, theirs was different in that their covenants actually expired. We learned of that, so they were kind of in a situation where there was really no control over the development of those properties. So this one's a little bit different in that there is a covenant in place, and the development is under the control of the ARC. So there's not that kind of frantic, have to get something in place situation here as we had there. In terms of, there would be a number of steps that the city would have to take to make this happen. The zoning map obviously changes, and you have on the screen there a copy of the zoning map. So there would be an ordinance to do that. The properties would be posted to make that happen. And there would be 2 readings, a public hearing, referred to the Planning Commission for their recommendation on whether or not this rezoning is in keeping with the comprehensive plan. Probably the most kind of unusual part of this rezoning is that because it removes units from the PDD, we would have to do a counter or an adjacent ordinance that lowers the number. As you'll recall, the PDD has a certain number of allotments. If these 11 units leave and that number is not changed, it would have the effect of increasing their allotted building numbers by 11. So we'll have to have a counter ordinance that would change the PDD. Very similar, we had to do the same thing with the 53rd to 57th properties, so we've been through that before. And then, as it's already been said, they will have kind of, I would guess, a parallel track with the Wild Dunes Community Association and dealing with the covenants that currently are in control.
Which would have nothing to do with the city here itself.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, there could be, if as we work through this issue, we may want to just keep tabs on that process to see, to verify that it's going to be okay, that we're not putting these 11 owners in a situation where we've adopted a new zoning scheme and they still have restrictive covenants, so they're having to deal with two sets of development standards, and the more restrictive of both, which is the way Waterway Island currently is. They are SR1, but they are also held to the ARC standard. So those owners have to comply. They have to kind of go through a checklist and identify the most restrictive of every requirement and comply with the most restrictive of each.
And for the public who may be listening to this, could you explain what the ARC acronym is and
Yeah,
what that entails?
That's the Wild Dunes Architectural Review Committee. They act in a similar role as my department acts in terms of zoning. So they're checking setbacks, trees, height, lot coverage, all of those types of things that if you're outside of Wild Dunes, that's handled by the city's building department. If you're inside Wild Dunes, you go through their ARC process, and I think it's either a 5 or 7 person board that reviews all these projects. In addition to just compliance, they also are looking at aesthetics. So they look at paint colors and harmony with the surrounding area, which when you're outside of the ARC, we don't look at it for aesthetic issues.
Okay. Before I open it up for discussion with council members, I did want to make a kind of a full disclosure. If you look at that map and you see those 11 plats, lots, whatever, homes in green, I'm in one of the yellow ones, second from the left, I guess, on 44th Avenue. So the Bosicks are my next door neighbors. So we're not, even though my home is not part of this 11 homes that are requesting the rezoning, I did want to disclose that they are my neighbors, and just want to make sure we lay that out there. So with that, Councilmember Myers, I think you wanted to weigh in here also.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, and I don't know, Douglas might have the answer to this too. Any pushback from the adjacent neighbors? Is anybody? Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
So you don't foresee any problems with Wild Dunes?
No, we don't see.
And do we have any idea how long that process will take, the Wild Dunes process?
You would be better if you went to the microphone.
Yeah, Rich, we don't mind you speaking, but please do it at the microphone there.
Have they given you any indication of the length, how long the process will take?
Yeah, based upon my initial conversations with them, they said it may take a month or two.
Okay.
But obviously what we did is, just so there's no confusion, we reached out to them first to make sure that they had a better understanding for the issue at hand and what we're requesting. And then we reached out to the city for their guidance on this issue. But anyway, they said about a month or two it would take for them to make this thing happen.
So we would need to get the ordinance written in first and second readings pretty quickly so that there's not a gap, right? Is that?
Well, if I can, obviously, we're flexible on this
Okay.
issue. If
So
you
you can
guys
push
need
it-
more, and that's exactly what I said in the letter to the city, is we, the community, want it to coincide, right? That we don't want there to be any gap. On the other hand, it's not critical that it gets done in a month or two. If it means another 30 days, so be it. It's gone on for that long anyway. So we're flexible. We'll work with the city and obviously with Wild Dunes.
Okay.
Okay?
Anything else, Councilmember Myers? Councilmember Popson, anything?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions.
Okay.
And I don't know who to direct it to. Maybe Douglas. would
Just throw
start
it out there at either Douglas or we'll have Mr. Bosick come back to the microphone. Just lay them out
Okay.
there.
So, it's my understanding that even if they're pulled out to a new zoning, they are still deed restricted to the covenants and restrictions of Wild Dunes. They also still are under play with the approval from the Wild Dunes ARC. So with that all being said, and I don't know, maybe they pay dues as well, but with all that being said, what is the purpose or the benefit of pulling out of the PDD and getting into this RS1 zoning?
Okay, I'll let Mr. Bostic answer
Yeah, well,
that.
let me first answer the question, because there's really two prongs to this issue. There's the issue with the restrictions from Wild Dunes. First of all, we, the 11 properties, are not members of the Wild Dunes Homeowners Association. We don't pay any fees. We don't get any benefit as a Wild Dunes resident would. There's nothing. If we want to get access to the gate of Wild Dunes, we do so as anybody in this area gets access to the gate. However, the restrictions of Wild Dunes are far more onerous than the restrictions IOP. And the fact that we're adjacent to properties who have different restrictions than the 11 properties is head scratching, to say the least. And what we're simply trying to do is ensure that there's a homogeneous feeling in the neighborhood, and ensure that everyone is treated the same. That's all we're trying to accomplish. Now, to your other point, we reached out to Wild Dunes, and yes, we need Wild Dunes to accept our request and to forego those restrictions. And we need to do that by modifying the covenants and gaining the input from other individuals. Unless we get that, then yes, there is really no benefit to us in modifying the zoning for our property. On the other hand, based upon conversations with Wild Dunes and the letter that they sent us yesterday, they don't see any reason why they're not going to approve our request. So what we're trying to do is get guidance from the city on moving the ball forward from your perspective, and at the same time address this issue with Wild Dunes. I hope that clears it up for you.
Kevin, does that clear that up a little bit?
Yes, I'm still a little confused because I'm sure there's a deed restriction that, marries them to the covenants, but I think he had mentioned that they were requesting to get out of that as well.
That's correct.
And you received a letter just yesterday?
Yes.
Correct? Okay, so we don't have,
Do you all don't have that?
we don't have that in our packet. So Kevin, I think, Douglas, correct if I'm wrong, we're missing a letter here, basically,
Yeah, we
that just came in yesterday.
Correct.
To Mr. Bostic, relaying what the apparent willingness is of Wild Dunes to make a change. Okay?
Gotcha. Mr. Chairman, one other question,
Okay.
maybe for Douglas.
Okay.
As far as next step, Douglas, should Wild Dunes release these folks first before we start taking votes on changing the zoning?
My advice would be that we go slightly first. So to avoid that gap, I would say that there's no reason why we have probably 5-6 steps and 2 or 3 months in our process. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't just start down those steps and processes and get it to the point where all it requires is a vote, the final vote of council to effectuate the change. But I would suggest that you get it to that point, and before we actually have you vote on the second and final reading, they have an indication that the deed and covenant issue is resolved and they're ready to be released. And I would suggest that we do the rezoning first, and then immediately thereafter, they release the covenants. Otherwise, if you do it the other, so that would create a very short window where they do have both controls, but I think that would be better situation than the covenant being released and us not having zoning in place, because that'll leave a gap with no control. So that would be my recommendation on the timing.
I guess my fear is if we get to a second reading and we change the zoning, what happens if Wild Dunes doesn't release
Yeah, I think we would
from the
need,
POA?
I think we would not, yeah, we would hold that
Second
ratification
reading?
until they were right at the finish line with Wild Dunes, I think. Worst case
Gotcha.
scenario, we get an indication that they are at the finish line, we rezone it, these neighbors or these owners would be under both until one or the other gets released.
And worst case scenario,
And then we could
if
put them
if
back,
something screwy happened, we could always just,
put it back.
Right.
Yeah,
Get rid of it. Yeah.
rescind the ordinances.
Yeah, there might be some overlap, there may be some gap or overlap one
Yeah, I
way or
would
the
suggest
other.
overlap as opposed to gap.
Right, gotcha.
If I can speak as well.
Yes, go ahead,
The-
Rich.
On behalf of the 11 property owners, we fully agree with you, and that's our intention. We don't want there to be a gap.
Okay. Anything else, Kevin?
Just out of curiosity, and maybe a question for Rick, how do you get out of the Wild Dunes POA? Is it the current board vote, or is it a 2/3 vote of the membership, or is Low Dart involved? What steps do you have to go through to get released?
To get released, what we have to do is put in a request to modify the covenants so that, it's interesting, I mean, we get in great detail. These 11 properties are subject to the regulations of Wild Dunes, but we are not members of Wild Dunes. We don't vote in Wild Dunes. We pay nothing to Wild Dunes. What happened is in the deeds, it was stated by the initial owner that we needed to follow the rules and regulations of Wild Dunes, and that Wild Dunes would enforce those regulations. Wild Dunes accepted that task, and it's included in their covenants that they will or have. What we're asking for Wild Dunes is to relinquish us from their authority on that. And that's exactly what they had said in their letter yesterday, that they're not opposed to relinquishing that from us for these 11 properties. So what'll have to happen is we need to make a filing with the association, modifying the covenants, like I had mentioned, and also providing some additional information that they need from not only the 11 property owners, but from the adjoining properties. And that's about it.
And Kevin, you'll get a copy of this letter, but let me do this to what Rich just spoke to. I'll just read part of the letter they received from Dave Konoski, the Chief Operating Officer for WDCA. I'm sorry, he's Chief Operating Officer for, the Community Association. That's correct. And he said, based upon I'm quoting here, the letter, which you'll get a copy of, based upon the legal advice we've received, changing the zoning on the 11 lots outside the gate will not negate the Architectural Review Committee or the ARC's jurisdiction over those lots. The ARC authority is derived from the covenants for properties in Isle of Palms Beach and Racket Club is assigned to the Wild Dunes Community Association. To no longer be subject to the ARC's jurisdiction, an owner would need to amend the aforementioned property covenants to release his or her lot from the covenants and to terminate ARC regulation. If all of the legal requirements to effect this change are adhered to, the community association would not be opposed to relinquishing ARC authority over the 11 lots currently under ARC regulation. So, and they go on to advise them to get legal guidance to assist them in that process and keep them informed. Okay? Still there, Kevin?
Yes, sir. That sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is that it? Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Councilmember Myers, anything?
No.
Douglas, anything else?
Do you all want to make a recommendation to the, to full council?
Yes, what should we do it in the form of a motion to, okay. Well, I'd like to make a motion to, move the request from property owners on 43rd, 44th, and 45th Avenue for properties to be rezoned from the PDD into SR1.
I'll second that.
And would that include directing staff to start drafting the necessary ordinances and maps to do that?
We would like staff to go ahead and do that. We have a motion made, we have a second. Any further discussion?
Does this go to the workshop first, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, it'll go to the workshop.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Uh,
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. All right, we'll move on or go back to item A under new business, which is discussion of future undergrounding utility projects with Dominion Energy. So Douglas, you want to bring us up to date on that
Yes.
also?
Yeah, you have in your packets a series of concepts and their associated prices. And this is for Dominion's non-standard service agreement work whereby we pay 50% and Dominion has a fund that pays the other 50% to convert overhead lines to underground power lines. We have been working, and we actually met with, Desiree and I met with members of the Dominion staff this past month about kind of next steps on those projects. And their staff indicated that there are two of the projects that are fairly, I'm not going to say easy, because we learned through 21st, which we thought was going to be easy, that it takes a long time and takes a lot of effort to get it done. But they identified the projects at 14th Avenue and the Marina as kind of the next low-hanging fruit to start tackling. I think it was kind of their position that we could really, probably, that they only had the bandwidth to do one project a year with having kind of the next project on the radar for the next year. So you all, or the city has $75,000 in this upcoming budget to support those projects. And I think that the way, and Dominion has committed and has agreed to begin design on both of those projects. So that's kind of their next formal step. And they've indicated that they're doing that and would continue to do that.
Is there a plan to leave project 2 and 3 and 5, just leave that alone at this point? No design or no? You said that
I'm
there.
missing my list. My list is somewhere here, but
I'm-
one of them is done. So 21st Avenue is done. What's the number on that one? Yeah, so 3 is actually completed. That's the one that just got done.
Okay. Okay. I thought that was something in addition. That's crossings conversion. I was going to ask a question about that, but
That one's done.
that's done.
Yeah, that one's
Okay.
done.
All right.
There's one here in our vicinity here that was between kind
11
of
and
600 and 900,000.
Yeah, that's Palm to Oak.
Oak
Oak
Harbor.
Park.
Yes.
Yeah, that I
That
guess
one-
goes from here down to here, down to City Hall.
Yeah, that one, they kind of felt like was maybe too ambitious, too expensive to start in the short term. So they wanted to keep that on the list, but put it to the out projects. And same with 41st Avenue. That was another one that was on our list of priorities. And after analyzing it, they felt like there was a lot of moving parts there and a lot of work to get done. So that left kind of the Marina and the work right here
14th.
at 14th Avenue.
And if you think back, I mean, really, that was really kind of our top priorities to
Yes.
begin with. I mean, this
They
really
were.
hasn't shifted much
Correct.
because we had 21st is really kind of the number one priority.
Yep.
And if I remember correctly, at one time, we had the Marina project as a second priority, and then 14th, or maybe it's 14th and the other, and then we had 41st always as being kind of the last priority because it was going to be more complicated.
Right, that's right. We did talk to them about the upcoming project, the upcoming drainage project at the intersection of Waterway Boulevard and 41st. They did feel like there would be some benefit to them to coordinate this project, this undergrounding project, with that drainage project. So they kind of have that on the radar for their crews to try to schedule it so that we would be doing both of those at the same time. I think it would require that the stars align a little bit to get it done, but that's our effort, and we'll, worse, we're gonna have crossings and repavings associated with that, so we would not be good to have to, cut up brand-new pavement. So
Right.
we're gonna make every effort to get those coordinated and, done it all at once.
And the city marina project overhead to underground, that wouldn't conflict with any of the work that we're doing on 41st because it's pretty much on the opposite side of the street.
Well, so those are the projects that they would be
They would coordinate that as well.
coordinating those projects,
All
that's
that,
correct.
okay.
Yeah, it says marina, but it actually goes up 41st a little ways.
Okay. Council members?
You need anything from us now, or is
No,
this in
no,
the-
this is really just informational. We're continuing to work on this and coordinate and,
Sounds good. Let's
Okay.
get it done.
Yep. Anything, Councilmember Popson?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, so this is just more of an update rather than any action on our
Correct.
part. Okay. Thank you very much. All right, and then item C, discussion of implementing adopt a drain program. And Douglas, again, I'll
Yeah.
ask you to weigh in on
Yeah,
this.
this is also just an update for you all. This is a project that the city of Isle of Palms is working with the city of Charleston, and we've already taken steps to become part of the city's Adopt a Drain program. We are sharing with them now information on our drainage system, and this program would allow local residents to adopt a drain. So, the goal here is that people locally would have eyes and the ability to do minor kind of clearing of drains. We think that there are people in the neighborhood who might have a drain that's 3 doors down that they feel awkward about going and, kind of working in front of somebody's house to clear a drain. And the city of Charleston feels like this project's worked well to address that. So you would have a few people in each neighborhood potentially that would be kind of local advocates for the drainage system and be able to unclog minor things when they see those. Unfortunately, I guess from our standpoint, the way the program works is it cannot include any SCDOT drains, which is probably the majority of our roadside inlets. Most of our roads are SCDOTs. And they also they did not want to include open ditches, culverts, things of that neighborhood. So when you look at kind of our entire drainage system, and I think there's in the vicinity of 120 drains that we have identified that could be adopted. It's kind of a drop in the bucket when you look at the entire system. But we do think that, and we've been in conversations with them about the possibility of expanding it to include DOT ditches or pipes, and to include open ditches if we could. So this is kind of a first step, and really what the city is doing is they're providing the mapping and kind of the software and back end that they already have built to do this. We would start publicizing that we are in a partnership. It's actually identical to what we've done with composting. That also is a city project. We kind of adopt their model and start cooperating with them on that. And it is our hope, and I think our expectation, that we would start really publicizing the availability of these drains at the upcoming expo. Is it May 16th? So we'll have a booth there, and we'll kind of be trying to get people to sign up for drains in their neighborhood.
Okay,
Sounds good.
sounds good to me. Do you get a plaque on the drain if you adopt it, or?
I don't think so. You may. We do have a little.
Picture on there?
Yeah.
Right.
Get your name on it.
Okay, and I can't imagine at some point SCDOT wouldn't want some additional help. Don't you think, Robert?
They can use all the help they can get. I think.
Right. Okay, so that's just more informative for us,
Yep.
more than anything, and we'll see more at the expo, and hopefully, we get a lot of interest on that, so. All right, so, being no further business other than miscellaneous business, and that's, next meeting date at 1 PM on June the 6th. Is everybody good for that at this point? Councilmember Myers, Councilmember Popson?
Fine by me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, that'll be our next meeting. No executive session needed, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Off record 137.